I'm Jeremy with Poindexter G, and today we're going to talk about the really bad bayonet that Teddy Roosevelt hated. Now, before we get into the story of the bayonet, we're going to talk about Teddy Roosevelt here a little bit, because the major part of this story that you need to know is that Teddy Roosevelt was a crazy dude. Now, he didn't start off as crazy. He was actually a pretty sickly child, and basically he got fed up with having asthma all the time. He decided that instead of feeling bad all the time, he was just going to stop feeling bad and feel awesome instead. He took up boxing, he took up hunting, he started doing all these strenuous activities, and instead of it killing him, it actually made him better. Now, when he was in his young adult years, his father died and left him with a rather large sum of money, enough money that he was pretty much independently wealthy and that he didn't need to actually do anything to get by from day to day. But one thing he decided he wanted to do was, I'm going to get into politics. Well, one thing you know about Teddy Roosevelt was that he kind of had like this rather larger than life personality. And he didn't always get along with everybody else in politics, and he got along with so poorly with a lot of people that were in charge of his party at the state level that he just got out of politics. He's like, I'm done with politics, I'm retiring. I'm gonna go off to North Dakota and be a cowboy. So he goes to North Dakota and does the cowboy thing for a while. He's up there until the people that he didn't get along with in New York aren't in power anymore, and he decides, okay, I can stop being a cowboy now, even though this cowboy thing's kind of fun, and go back and be a politician again. He gets approached by some people that say, hey, we've got a good position for you that you would like in New York. You need to be on the police commission. So he gets on the police commission, and he's the president of the police commission, and he's really active here. The police commission position is a way to get appointed to a different position, which this is a position back with the president as the Assistant Secretary of the Navy. So he's Assistant Secretary to the Navy. Well, something really big happens while he is in that position, and that is the Maine explodes. Okay, now the USS Maine exploding needs like its own separate video to explain the importance of this. But basically, it happened in a foreign port, and a lot of people at the time, including Teddy Roosevelt, thought that it was blown up by the Spanish. Now, in retrospect, it's looking more like it was probably just an accident. But hey, they all thought it was blown up by Spain. They want to go to war with Spain. Teddy Roosevelt really wants to go to war with Spain. Well, the president's not really sure about wanting to go to war. There's just so much pressure going on that eventually we go to war with Spain. And now, most politicians, when they push for a war and the war starts, they just kind of sit back in their chair and yep, I get to oversee a war now from my nice, comfortable politician chair. Is that what TR is going to do? No. Teddy ain't going to sit back and see no war going on from a political position. He resigns as Secretary of the Navy to go accept a position to lead a unit in the war. This is where the Rough Riders come from. This is what the newspapers and the media named them. And he does that, and he was pretty awesome at it. Now, this gets Teddy a lot of attention. Now, this was just a temporary unit that was used for the war. Once the war was over, the Rough Riders were disbanded. And somebody's like, hey, Teddy, you still want to be a politician? And he's like, yeah, I could do that because this war's over. And they're like, all right, we want to make you governor of New York. So he goes and runs for governor of New York. And he wins there as governor of New York. And a lot of the people that are running the Republican Party in New York are really not wanting to deal with him anymore because, wow, we can't control this guy. Well, it just so happened that President William McKinley's vice president had died, and it was time for another election, and they managed to convince McKinley to accept Teddy Roosevelt as his vice president. Now, Teddy Roosevelt did not really like being vice president because it was a position that really didn't have a whole lot of power. And Teddy Roosevelt was not a Mike Pence, Joe Biden type who was fine to sit behind the outgoing, very vocal present president. Well, things changed for him when President McKinley was assassinated. And Teddy becomes president. And Teddy decides, hey, I'm president now. I can do my thing. And did Teddy Roosevelt make an impact as president? Oh, yes, he did. He decides that he's going to do all the big stuff that the president's supposed to. But if there was some little small thing that interested him, he would just jump in there on that because he was president. He could do what he wants there. Some of the big things that he was known for was getting the Panama Canal built and for fighting a lot of corruption that was going on, kind of the same as what he was doing as police commissioner and as governor of New York. But he also got into other things, like he saw that a lot of people are like, oh, this football game is like way too violent. People are getting hurt all the time. We need to stop this at the college level. And Teddy really loved in some football. So he got with the colleges and like, hey, you got to make some rule changes to make this a little bit safer. When I say a little bit, I mean just a little bit safer. But he got in there and he saved football. So thank you, Mr. President. Now, did being president stop Teddy Roosevelt from doing any of the other stuff he wanted to do? No. He had boxing matches all the time where he would box against various young guys from the military. They were like serious boxing. In 1908, when he was president, he got hit in the face so hard that it detached his retina where he couldn't really see out of that eye properly anymore. He was basically blind in that eye. But he decides to leave the presidency. He helps pick the guy that was going to run after him, Taft. Once Taft got in there as president, Teddy Roosevelt saw him and like, what, Taft, you suck. You're horrible. This is awesome. I mean, if you're going to be that bad, I'm just going to run against you next time. So he goes to run against Taft. Now, it didn't end up winning. It just ended up splitting the ticket, and that's what allowed Woodrow Wilson to come in. It was around this time that he famously gave a speech after getting shot. Someone tried to assassinate him. He got shot, went through his eyeglass case, went through his speech. He just pulls out the speech with a hole in it and the blood on it and tells the crowd, I don't know if any of you realize that I just got shot, but it takes more than that to stop a bull moose. So he spoke for 90 minutes and then eventually allowed them to give him some medical attention. Now you think that this might slow him down, but no, he decided, well, if I'm not going to be president anymore, I'm just going to do other crazy stuff. Speaking of Woodrow Wilson, some little war broke out while he was president. That would be the Great War, or World War I as we call it now. But Teddy Roosevelt was like, what? We got another war going on? Great, I'm gonna form another group of guys like the Rough Riders. He talks to Congress, he's getting it going, he's gonna go lead them over there. And President Wilson's like, no, you can't lead another group of guys into battle in Europe. You're a former president. And Teddy got really mad about that and wrote some pretty nasty things about Woodrow Wilson. So he apparently really wanted to do that, and he didn't care that he was a former president. He goes on this expedition. I'm going to go off to South America, and I'm going to chase down to where this river goes that no one's ever found the end of it. And he gets a cut on his leg that's severe and gets infected, and he gets sick, and the bullet in his chest starts getting infected, and he gets really bad. He gets so bad that he literally tells the party that he's with, hey, I'm not going to make it, just leave me out here and I'll OD on some morphine. And his son that's there is like, no, we're not going to leave you there. You're my dad and you're a former president. We can't leave you. Now, this is what eventually slowed him down, and he never really recovered from that and wasn't ever the same after that. So, Teddy Roosevelt, crazy dude. So what is it about this bayonet that I promised you earlier? Well, it starts during the Spanish-American War when we were using the Krag Jorgensen. The Krag Jorgensen rifle had this weird loading thing where you opened the door on the side and kind of dumped rounds in there and hoped they all went in right and didn't jam. And it didn't work most of the time, and it caused them a lot of trouble. And even though we won the Spanish-American War, we really liked those Spanish Mausers a whole lot better than what we had. So they decided that they wanted to make something that was a lot like a Mauser, the model 1903. So basically, while the 1903 is in production, Teddy Roosevelt is president. And they are liking the 1903. They're just trying to figure out some of the small things on it. And somebody got an idea something to do for the bayonet. Now they had kept the idea of a cleaning rod in there, which was originally a ramrod used for ramming the ball and the powder down there on the muzzle loaders. Once we got into cartridges, that wasn't necessary, but they still like having them for cleaning and also to pop out the brass if it gets stuck in there. And somebody got the idea, if we make that cleaning rod really, really thick, make it just like a smidge smaller than the bore, and make one end of it pointy, we can make it a bayonet. You basically slide it in the one way and it stops short of the muzzle, but you can pull it out, stick it in the other way, it'll stick out a ways and have a pointy end on it, and that can be your bayonet. And they thought this was a great idea and they started making it. Now, what was the problem with it? Well, there was a particular president who didn't like this cleaning rod bayonet thing at all. We actually have the letter that he wrote about how bad he thought this was, and I'm going to read you some excerpts from it. I must say that I think the ramrod bayonet about as poor an invention as I ever saw. As you observed, it broke short off as soon as hit with even moderate force. It would have no moral effect and mighty little physical effect. I wish our officers could carry rifles. If they do carry any sword, they ought to carry a sword that they can cut or thrust with. This ramrod bayonet business does not make me feel that we can afford too much trust to the theory of the closest variety. So yeah, Teddy, why don't you tell him how you really feel? So none of that ramrod bayonet business. Let's go back to a real bayonet, something like this that we had on the Krag, and they stayed around, and we still use a bayonet a lot like this. So if you really like this type of video, you can let me know by leaving a comment or giving it a big thumbs up and a like. You can also subscribe to my channel to make sure that you don't miss any of the videos that I put out. I'm Jeremy with Poindexter G, and we'll see you next time.